Good morning, everybody. Last week we talked about the 10-day Vipassana silent meditation that I went through, and I decided to do mini broadcasts so that I could talk to you a little bit about each day, because the lessons that were learned were so very big that I thought I would just give you little vignettes, small vignettes every Saturday morning of each of the days. So if you want to know more about the overall, like a high-level overview of the meditation, it was a 10-day silent meditation retreat that I attended, and it was through Vipassana. I did get permission from them to share this information, so it's important for you to know exactly what it is. So it's Vipassana meditation by S.N. Goenka. It was 10 days of silence, and where we learned a lot. There were a lot of lessons. So I'm just going to go through the very first day because I think it's really important. And as I went through the actual, there's a book on the discourses, and there are videos that are online and so forth. But as I was going through the day one, I think there are several lessons. So let me walk you through what day one was about so that you can understand what the day one was about. And then I'll tell you what the leadership lessons were, and then how I applied them, and what the difference has been in my life and in my leadership journey as I have continued to lead my team. This week is my second week back from our meditation retreat, and so I've seen a lot of different things. So day one, we started at 4:30 a.m. I would wake up at 4 o'clock and took a quick shower, and then at 4:30 we meditated. So in essence, 4:30 to 5:30 you could meditate in your room, and then 5:30 you would go into the meditation hall. And I posted a picture of the meditation hall that I took, so you could kind of see the different colors are where the men and then where the women were seated. The first day was all about setting context and beginning to really work diligently on our own bodies and on our breaths. So I remember he had us focusing on this part of the body, and it was kind of a bigger part of the body, because then later we got to smaller part of the body, and we did some breathing exercises. I kind of took some notes as I was going through, remembering day by day, because we were not allowed to take notes. It's more of an experiential exercise. So it was so setting the stage, I thought, was really important. And when we take on a brand new team, and I remember when I took on my new team at California Bank and Trust, setting the stage and setting context for how we were going to be communicating, and what my expectations were really important. And they did that. They talked a lot about setting the stage, and so starting with not being able to, they said, self-accountability, abstain from killing any being, abstain from stealing, from sexual activity, from telling lies, from any intoxicants, and any sexual entertainment or body decorations. Why did they do that? They did that to set context for keeping your mind clean and keeping your body clean. And as I think about my leadership journey, I think about the context that I set for my team. For example, being on time is really important, and being on time was something that was really critical. What they said in the discourse at night, they had discourses every night with leadership lessons. What I took on as leadership lessons, and being on time or being a little bit early was important. So if we needed to be there at 4:30, I was usually there at 4:20. There were 3 times during the day where all of us got together to meditate together, and then we had options of meditating in our room if we wanted to. I chose to go into the room because I knew that I would be more focused. And so setting context in our leadership team and for our own families is really important. So being on time was one of them. And I had a conversation with a team this week where we had a meeting and we talked about being on time and the importance of being on time and how critical it is and what message does it send to people when we are on time. It sends to people the message that we are being respectful, that we respect them, and it creates a level of integrity, not just with our own selves, which is most important, is really keeping ourselves integrous with what we say we're going to do. And then however we're going to behave within ourselves, that's how people are going to take us. And then I take that even a step further. The people that I surround myself with, those are the kinds of people that I'm going to attract. And so if I say this is my context ahead of time, then all of a sudden that context is created and people know exactly what to expect from us. Now, if I set a context and I don't act according to that context, then there's incongruency between that. And I talk a lot about that in my book, of keeping congruent with your values, your set of values, and then your actions. And that's how we set trust. That's how we set a level of trust. So the day one was setting the context for what we were to expect. Now, it's up to us to follow the guidelines or not. I chose to follow the guidelines. I figured if I'm going to spend 10 days in silence and go through this, I'm going to give it 100%. So I wanted to just really be integrous with all of this. We did have to work very diligently because if you think about focusing on your breath, so we had to just really take a focus, close our eyes, and focus on when the breath is coming in, when the breath is coming out. Not trying to have the breath go faster or slower, but just really focusing on it as it is. And that is what the word Vipassana actually means, is looking at the world the way it is, equanimously. Equanimity is a word that I brought to you last week, and it's a new word for me, and it just means looking at things as they are without judgment or without putting anything into it, but just really looking at things and looking at people how they are. And that was a big lesson always also for my life, is if somebody says something, normally my brain goes 100 miles an hour and I'm trying to figure out what did they mean behind that, what was the message behind that, instead of just taking the message for what it is. And then if I have any questions, not making up those questions, but actually asking, what did you mean by that? Because I'm thinking that this is what you meant. Is this what you meant? And then they will tell me exactly what they meant, instead of me trying to make it up in my mind because I don't really know exactly what they're trying to say. Hi, Maria Silva. Thank you for joining. Yeah, it was actually pretty amazing. And by the way, if you have any questions as I'm going through, go ahead and put them, type them in, and I'll be able to answer the questions as you go through. And if for any reason I miss your question, I'll give it to you later on. So working diligently and be very, very focused was really important. So as we focused again on this area of the body and focused on the breath coming in and coming out, our minds became more laser-like focused. And as I go through the different days and the experience I had in different days, it was really interesting to see how our minds got so focused. And now today, being back for now my second week in the office, I'm finding that I'm even more laser like focused, and I'm able to articulate things to people in a more focused way. So my meetings are now, my 1 hour meetings have become like 40-minute meetings, and my calls are a lot sharper and they're quicker. I get to the point a lot faster. I'm making decisions quicker, and my people are seeing the result of those decisions being made quicker, and they certainly appreciate it. So it's really, really big. So back to the breathing, I started to focus on the breathing, and then after the end of the first day, I started to notice that even the breath coming in was cold and the breath coming out was warm. I started to feel it right around this area above my lips. He talked about, if your breath is shallow, just keep it shallow. If your breath is deep, then keep it deep. Observe if it comes in one nostril and coming out of the other, if it's both, but just really observe it the way it is. And I wonder how many times we do that in life. And I've been really giving a lot of thought to just the depth of just that little comment. How many times do we wish that life was different? How many times do we focus on the future or think of the past and miss our present altogether? And so the equivalence of every single thing we did in the translation into our daily lives was pretty important and pretty insightful. So he said, don't interfere with the natural flow of your breath. Don't interfere with life the way it really is. The first day was probably one of the most difficult ones because I had to get into a new routine. And sitting and meditating for such a long time, it's uncomfortable for the body and it's uncomfortable for the mind, because if you think about really focusing on your breath only, then all of a sudden your mind begins to think and go somewhere else, and then all of a sudden you catch your mind and you bring it in. You say, no, I really need to focus on my breath. This is what I need to focus on today. So we continue to do that, and I was thinking that this is what happens in, there's a book called The Leadership Ladder. And for those of you who are in leadership positions or wanting to be in leadership positions, I would highly recommend that book. It talks about the paradigm shift that happens when you are an individual producer to going to a manager of individual producers, and then the paradigm shift of managing one person or a few people to managing leaders, and then to managing areas, and then to managing divisions, and then to being the CEO. So it gives you the ladder, the leadership ladder in your journey. And I was thinking about that the first day. Goenka was saying that your body and mind have become prisoners to the pattern of life. Your body and mind become prisoners to the pattern of life. We get up in the morning, we brush our teeth, we go to the restroom, we take a shower, we go to work, we stop at wherever, Starbucks, or we get a cup of coffee, and then we go and we get into a routine, and we get into the rut of a routine. And if we're going to have a paradigm shift in our life, in our minds, in setting up a paradigm shift in the way we think, there's going to be a shift. There's going to be pain. And I remember my paradigm shift when I went to do my dissertation, and even just going into my doctorate. I had to set it up so that I would be successful. I had to tell my family. I created here at the house, I did a Goodbye Betty party, and we actually invited, I think there were like 45 people at the house, and told them for the next 3 years of my life, this is what's going to happen. And I set myself up to win. And then even friends like Clemencia and her husband, one night, it was really late at night, and I was working, and I couldn't remember the last time I had eaten. It was over a long weekend. And the very next day, her husband brought me his wonderful chili, and he was taking care of me. That would not have happened had I not set myself up to win. And so back to your body and mind have become prisoners of the pattern of life. You have to create different patterns in your life, and you have to be open to creating new patterns in your life if you're going to create that paradigm shift. So that was a big lesson on day one that I needed to really focus myself on, this is something new that I'm going to do, and the pattern of my life is going to change for the next 10 days. As long as I'm dedicating 10 days of my life, I'm going to give it 100%, and I'm not going to shift. And he said, don't bring any other meditation techniques to this. Just do it exactly like we say. And I think of my people at the bank, and we talk about building relationships and building trust for generations, right? Making connections, but making deep connections. And maybe some of them came from other banks, or they came from other industries, and we ask you to do the same thing. And I'm thinking there's a lot of parallels between day one and what we learned in day one in life in general. You want to do something different, then your mindset has to change. If you want to have a diet, your mind has to change. And yesterday at this wealthy girl conference that my friend Alicia Dunham's put together, and I'll post some pictures from that later. One of the ladies, it was a fabulous event, and those of you who were there, I know you know about it. They were talking about, you have to shift your mind, you have to change. And in a diet, they were saying, you got to give yourself a little leeway, you got to give yourself an opportunity to win if you really are going on a diet, or if you're going to be doing something different. So only the breath. Why only the breath? And what was the goal of the technique? The final goal was what he said was to clear your mind, to learn how to clear your mind, which for somebody like me, it was not an easy task, because thoughts kept coming in. But I actually did learn how to clear my mind, which is an amazing experience when you are able to just really focus on what's important without having thoughts or interferences. My first day back at the office, I was having a meeting with my assistant, and the very first day, I was getting text messages, and I turned it off and put the phone down upside down. And she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, that's a distraction. I really want to be focused on you." And she said, "Well, that's different." And I said, "Well, how would it have been otherwise?" And she said, before you went into the meditation, what you would do is you would be talking to me, and then the phone would ring, or you'd get a text message, and then you would just look at the text message, and then you would focus on it, and then you would tell me the story, and then we would get distracted, and then we'd come back. And that meeting, our meeting, ended very quickly, and our subsequent meetings have ended very quickly because I'm so focused. And how often do we focus on the phone when we're at dinner at the table with our children, or with our family, or with our friends, or with someone else, or in a meeting? How often do we focus on this instead of setting ourselves up to win and telling your assistant, "Here's my phone, answer the text messages for me. If somebody needs me, just make sure and let them know that it's going to be an hour. And if it's an emergency, come and interrupt." So little things like that we can use in our everyday life. With our children, when my kids were little, I would teach them to put their hand on my shoulder if I was talking to someone at a party or at an event that we were. So they would just simply put their hand on my shoulder. I would reach over and tap them to let them know, "I hear you, I get you." And then I would continue the conversation, and then I would say, "Excuse me just a moment," and then I would turn around and say, "Yes, baby." And then my daughter or whoever would know, now it's time. And so they patiently waited because they knew. So little things like that we could do in our everyday life. Again, staying really, really focused. But the final goal of this cleansing of your mind was to really purify the mind and to change the present behavior pattern. What happens when we do that? When we begin to make those changes, we become agitated, and then we get to observe, right? So he started as only observing the breath. Again, it's day one, so I'm not going to get out of day one because there's so many different lessons in each day. So next Saturday, I'll talk to you about what happened in day two, which we went a lot deeper in day two. Excuse me. And each day we went deeper and deeper and deeper into the meditation. So that was pretty much day one. And then how when we start generating negativity was something that we started to notice. So on day one, we started to notice, yeah, I was sitting down and it was painful sometimes, because if I'm sitting down without moving too much for 1 hour, that's a long time to sit for those of us who are not used to it. So we started getting agitated, we started getting some pain, and the idea was, okay, what is it that you're feeling, and how does your body react when you are agitated? How does your body react when you feel pain? Again, to repeat what I said last week, when I focused on the pain, and I would say, oh my gosh, it's hurting, it's gonna hurt even more, then the levels of the pain went up. But when I looked at the pain objectively, equanimously, without putting any judgment on the pain, then I would say, okay, the pain is here, knowing that the pain is going to come and it's going to go, just like everything in life will come and go. And when we look at the pain, or when we look at the agitation, and when we look at the things we begin to feel, like, oh my goodness, like hate or undesire or rejection, or all of those things that actually bring negative things into your life. Hey Bob, good to see you. Then when we look at those negative things in your life, then if you look at it objectively and say, okay, wait a minute, why am I feeling like this? Why is this person causing me to feel like this? And then instead of saying, oh, I hate this person, or I hate this moment, or I want to get out of this moment, if we just say, what is the reason why this feeling is coming in, and look at it objectively and look at it equanimously, then all of a sudden the pain goes down. For me, the pain would go from an 8 all the way down to a 2 as soon as we looked at it equanimously. For the ladies here and the gentlemen who went through Lamaze with your wives, before you had the baby, you can understand, because in Lamaze they focus you on something outside of you. Here you focus on your own body, so you learn to really react to your own body, which is really interesting. So again, taking a look at the negative things that happen in your life and understanding this too shall pass, we say in North America. So if it's going to come and it's going to go, then observe it while it comes, observe it equanimously, and then just let it go as it continues. Let's see. So the framework we talked about, every step that you're taking must be in truth. And I told you one of the things they told us at the very beginning was setting the context. You know, you're not to lie. And that particular one was really big. So looking at things exactly as they are, not making up things, not imagining things, and not thinking, okay, what is that going to look like? Hey, Brian, thank you. Yeah, it was huge insight. So not looking at things as they come to us and putting judgment on it, because the moment we put judgment on it, it's no longer truth. It is our truth. It becomes our truth. It becomes our interpretation of the truth, but really taking a look at things as they are. And then for me, during my work week this week, was also looking at how are people taking what I say. Because if I say something that is an untruth, or if I say something that I imagine without backing up what I'm saying, then it no longer is truth. Then now it becomes my interpretation of the truth. And that leaves room for interpretation. That leaves room for someone to say, is she really telling the truth, or is she imagining things? Or is this her interpretation of that person, what they said? But this is how we build trust with people, is by actually always being, one, congruent with what we say our values are. If I say I value quality time, then I get to spend quality time, and I get to not let this one take the priority, or not let interruptions take a priority. If I'm with one person, I need to be with them. So again, leaving things as they are rather than making our interpretation. So a lot of leadership lessons this week from day one. Setting the context is one of them. If you have any questions, by the way, just go ahead and type them in, or any comments, and I'll answer them. And if I don't have time, then I'll answer them afterwards. Setting the context, setting expectation, and setting accountability in such a way that people around you set their own accountability, and you don't have to set their accountability for them. And that's what Michael Gerber, my friend Michael Gerber, the author of the book E-Myth, he sold over 3 million books, and he talks about setting the context in such a way that the leader is not needed to run the business, that people around you can actually run the business for you, but you've got to be able to set that context at the very beginning in order for that to happen. I had a conversation with one of my managers this week, and they needed some help in making a decision, and the decision could have been made by them and relatively new manager. And I realized, oh my goodness, if I give this person the authority and the responsibility, so not just the authority but also the responsibility of making decisions on their own, then I'm going to be able to create that context where they will be able to manage by themselves, and I won't be needed for the small decisions like that. So setting that context is really important. The second lesson was working diligently and working properly. And so when we set something new in our organization, if we set the stage that they need to work really diligently, and we check to make sure that they're working properly and doing all of the right things. In banking, it's really critical because we are governed by the government, and a lot of compliance is in play. The determination was important, and people ask me, how did you do your doctorate and raise a family and work all at the same time, and how did you get it done in 3 years, and how were you able to create a quality product that would give you honors on your dissertation? How did you do all of that? Well, it's called determination, and that's something that I look for when I hire people, is how determined are they and how badly they want it, because if they want it really badly, they're going to be determined, and how committed are they, not just when they interview, but as they go. I have my employee text me this morning. He just came back from being abroad for 10 days, and he was really thinking about the organization, not just thinking about himself. That's determination, and that's dedication, and I love that about him. Complete silence. The complete silence was important, and I learned that complete silence for those 10 days was critical, because if you begin to talk to someone else, and think about this in your own life, and think about this with your own teams, if you begin to talk to someone else, then you're going to be comparing your experience to their experience. And I often talk, when I speak to big groups, I talk about, don't ever compare yourself to other people, because if you are wanting to be just like them and they're here, and you want to get to here, but what if your capabilities and your abilities are way up here? Then what you've done all of a sudden is you've gotten yourself a ceiling, and your ceiling is lower than yours. So when you're comparing yourself to someone else, then you're comparing yourself to their limitations. You're putting yourself to their limitations. And so I see why the silence is so important. And that's something that I created with my team, with my senior leaders, is don't compare yourself to others. And you get to be yourself. Wayne, one of my leaders, says, I really appreciate you allowing me to be myself, and just really allowing me to lead the way I lead. I don't want a lot of Bettys out there. I want people to be who they are with the leadership lessons that we learn together as a group. So complete silence and having that reality within yourself is really important, and really taking a look at what are my limitations. So in the meditation, if I were to have talked to someone else, then those conversations would come into my meditation, and I was really trying to get my brain refocused and being more laser-like. And so that is pretty much the lessons of today. I hope you like what you're hearing, and the implementation of those leadership lessons. Next Saturday morning at 8 a.m., I'll come back with the leadership lessons from day 2. So thank you for watching. Thanks for your questions that you brought in the comments afterwards. There were some people that actually dialed up last time afterwards and asked some questions, and I was able to answer the questions. So I will talk to you next Saturday. Have a super fantastic weekend, everyone. Bye now.